Okay. Okay, so we learned yesterday that we go so far as to count as tzedakah if you give someone money in order to help them buy an apartment. Right? So, oh, look at that. It's still not working. Look at that. Look at that. Okay, so we have a very simple fix. Yeah. Yeah, it's all anything's possible, right? But we're not going to troubleshoot it now. Okay. All right. So we learned yesterday that, and here we're getting into more of the Israeli socioeconomic standards that a person may feel that that a couple is entitled to be purchased an apartment because that's just, for some communities, that's the standard. But that doesn't mean that people in North America have to abide by the tzedakah standards of what goes on in Israel. Avreichim lamrot shegarim b'shichunim charediyim, aval einam garim b'merkazei haTorah. He says you may have young men who live in Haredi neighborhoods, but do not live in Torah centers. V'hadavar alul lahashpia l'ra aleihem o al mishpachotehem. And therefore, it could bode poorly for them, meaning that it could cause them to leave their Torah studies if they are not in a more centralized area of Torah study, like in Bnei Brak or Kiryat Sefer, something like that. And a young man may feel, hey, I want to move closer to the big city so that I'll be able to study Torah more intensely. V'zu hatzalam mamash b'shvilam shelo yaduru sham. Muter lahem lekabel tzedakah kedei likno dira b'merkazei haTorah. He says it would be acceptable for them to accept charitable donations in order to be able to move to the bigger city. Denechshav b'shvilam de machzora. Because for someone like that, that's considered what they need in order to fulfill whatever is their deficit. Aval im ein medubar b'hashpa'a ra'ah. But if it's not a question of being under a bad influence, because he's not, let's say, in other words, it's one thing for him to say, I'm living in a neighborhood which is affordable because it's so far out in the boondocks, but I'm not with my chevra, I'm not able to learn properly, and I want to be able to get into a bigger community so that I'll be able to learn more and be more religiously committed. So it would be permitted for him to become committed to, sort of indebted to the tzedakah system in order to do that. That's an acceptable, I guess what you'd say, it's an acceptable reason for becoming dependent upon the tzedakah system. Okay, which for some people may sound surprising. In other words, there is an ethic that I believe exists in some communities, including our own, that you would shy away from accepting tzedakah at any cost, right? Because I'd rather live in the sticks than and be independent and not be on the dole than to have to accept tzedakah. But there are those who feel not that way, and I know that that's true even for some people who may be in Thornhill. They may feel it's legitimate for me to accept a charitable donation to be part of a community like this, so that I can have a good influence on others, and I'll be strengthened as well.
But sometimes they still, they have a certain limited infrastructure. They don't, for example, here, let's even close to here, a lot of people you got to probably move to Hamilton to make it a little bit more affordable. Yeah. But they don't really have. They have a basic infrastructure, but they're not surrounded by like we are here. So
correct,
right?
Correct, yeah. But we would tell a couple, listen, you go with what you can afford. I mean, that's what I would tell my own kids. So, my attitude is, if you can't afford the big city, so you be the source of influence to others instead of, accepting charity. He says, but let's say the young man is fine where he is, but he feels he could do much better. Right? He feels that he could. In other words, I'm learning okay, and my spiritual needs are being met, but I could go be even higher if I go back to Bnei Brak. Yesh lihistapek im nechshav b'shvilo de machzero. And that's not so clear. And what Sefer is he quoting? He's quoting Rav Vosner. And that's not really. It's not so clear that you'd be allowed to take charity for that purpose. Okay, next, Kala, Sheritzona be'emet lihinasei leven Torah. A young lady would like to marry a ben Torah. In other words, she's been through the educational system, and she has been duly influenced, shall we say, to accept the message that she should not settle for a guy who's just going to go and work, but rather she's got to marry a guy who's going to learn and be a ben Torah. He says, "V'lo misdamin la ki'im b'mamon harbe," and the only way that that's going to happen is if her family comes up with a lot of money, so that she can provide a dowry, so that the boy can sit and learn. Mutar lo lekabel tzedakah kedei shetitchatein v'nechshav b'shvila dei machzara. It is permissible for her to accept charity, so that her family can come up with a sufficient dowry to pay for a young man who will accept her as a bride because of the money payment. See, this is all a cultural thing. This is purely a cultural thing, and it's basically making a judgment call. What is considered to be acceptable acceptance for tzedakah? I don't think that if we were writing this sefer, we would give these kinds of guidelines. This is a very much a Haredi-centric guideline. Next, mutar l'shalem et hahotzaot ha'achreichiyot shel chatunat banav mikaspei ma'aser k'she'en lo kesef acher l'shalem. A person is allowed to pay for the basic essential needs of his son's wedding from his meister money. You can use your meister money to pay for your child's wedding when you don't have other money to pay for it, but it's hahotzaot ha'achreichiyot, the necessary expenses. What does that mean, necessary expenses? Well, you got to pay for a hall, but do you have to pay for 300 guests? I don't know. Why should you? Is that considered to be a necessary expense? The catering costs for 300 or 500 guests? No, I don't think so. Okay, so.
Like this, would severely limit nicer money that year.
Potentially it would, yeah.
Down to nothing for many people.
Well, for some people it would, I suppose, but this could be easily abused also. I don't think that this was written responsibly. Okay, but anyway, let us go on. Yesh mi shepasak shemuter lachsoch mikaspei maaser lahotzaot shel chatun. In other words, you start off with general rules about having to be meticulous with tithing, and then you give all of these dispensations about the social pressures of living in a religious society are such that by the time you're finished, you're not going to have any money left to give to poor people because you've spent it on all of these social conventions that place pressure on a person who doesn't have a lot of means to pay for them. יש מי שפוסק שמותר לחסוך מכספי מעשר להוצאות של חתונת בניו לפני שהתחילו בשידוכים. Some people hold that you're actually allowed to take money out of your Meiser money and put it into savings, even if they haven't even started finding a shidduch. In other words, I'm going to be putting away money to pay for my son's wedding and for all of the needs of his early married life. I'm going to use my tzedakah money for that, but it's going to take me time to accumulate that nest egg that I'm going to need for my son's wedding. So, b'tanai shim lo yatchil lachsoch ata lo yihya lo le'et hatzarach. In other words, I have to start putting money away for that. So since I'm allowed to use my Meiser money for that purpose, maybe I'll start 5 years before my son's holding in Shidduchim and put that money aside so that when it's time for him to get married, I'll have saved up some money.
Really separated George Klein, that it should be used within the year. Should you have years to use it, or
yeah, you can wait. This is what he's saying. This is exactly what he's saying. My son hasn't even started dating yet, and I don't think he's going to start dating for the next 3 years, the next 5 years, or the next 10 years. I can put money aside for his wedding, just like let's say an American family would put money in their children's college fund, right? To be able to save up money so that the kid can afford university. What he's basically saying is that since you're going to need a chunk of money to be able, because in Israel, it's not just paying for the wedding. You've got to pay for the apartment. You've got to get the kids furniture. You've got to basically cover their living expenses for the first several years so that the guy can go sit and learn without having to worry about parnasa. So, and because you're allowed to count that as tzedakah because you're supporting a ben Torah, so then you could start putting money away years in advance. And that could be taken out of your Meiser money, which is like you said, Ron, that could drain your Meiser account down to zero for years. Okay. V'yesh mi shepasak shemuter lachsoch mikaspei ma'aser lahotzaot shel chatunat habanot migil yud zayin shanim ba'elach v'shel habanim migil yud ches shanim ba'elach. Some say that you should only start this savings program for girls from the time they turn 17 and for boys from the time that they turn 18. This is all indiscriminate. This is all has to do with social standards. And he's just quoting Rav Eliashiv, right? V'yesh mi shepasak shemuter lachsoch afilu kishehigiu legil yud aleph. V'yesh osrim b'chol ofan. Some say that you can start from the time the child turns 11, and some say that you should never do this. In other words, you can't squander your Meiser money for your child's wedding in advance. V'yesh meha osrim shenatan eitza lahavkid chelek mikaspei ha'Meiser legemach shenotein halvaot v'yatneim hagemach. Some say that here's the best eitzah: give your tzedakah money to a gemach. And what does the gemach do? A gemach is a free loan society. The gemach lends money to people who need to borrow to make a wedding. Okay, and you make a condition, a stipulation with the gemach, sheyikabel b'chazara et apikadon bizman sheyechaten et banav, and you make a deal with the gemach that you can get the money back when you need to make a wedding for your own kids. So this is a very good system. In other words, I'll take my Meiser money, I'll invest it in a gemach. That money will be able to be used to lend out to people. The gemach will get the money back eventually because these people are only borrowing the money. They're not taking the money outright as tzedakah, assuming, of course, that the people who borrow the money are going to pay it back, right? And then I'll be able to use the money at the proper time for my own son's wedding, which I can justify for tzedakah. Yeah. Va'az ksheyitztarech lechaten otam, rashai lakachet et hakesef mehagamach, uletito betur ma'aser litzarach hanisun. Okay, that's what we just said. Now, if everyone in society does that, so the question is, will it work? Maybe it would work. I don't know. I don't know if it would work. Okay. So now we're ready to start the next chapter. And again, the entire latter part of this chapter 10, as far as what you can count as tzedakah money, it really meant, it's very, very focused on the Israeli Haredi system. From halacha ches and onwards, as far as what you can justify for tzedakah and how you collect tzedakah for individuals within your society that are needy. And what
a lot of these things that we're doing right now, of the leniency.
Yeah, well, the leniency of using your Meiser money for your children's wedding is very much a b'diavad. Yeah, it's very much a b'diavad, especially because so much of the things that we do for our children's wedding are extravagances. They're not considered to be. Doug is here. Doug says the gemach idea would only work if you paid into the gemach the equal amount that you spend on your wedding. Yeah, obviously, right. I mean, it's a good point, Doug. It's only going to work if the amount that you put in is the amount that you need to spend for the wedding. But let's say you have a shortfall of 20 grand. So you're going to end up getting your money back. Then you go to a different gemach and you'll borrow the money. And eventually the gemachs will be operating at a deficit. And so people will be defaulting right and left. Or, unless you pay back eventually over the course of time. Okay, in any event, because these are so specific, these last few halachas are so specific to an Israeli Haredi system, which is constantly borrowing from Peter in order to pay Paul, right? That kind of thing. I don't know that we can say that we would rely on these latter halachos and recommend them as guidelines for anyone in our own community. Okay. Siman Yud Aleph. Seder adifus b'tzedakah. So the preferential way to give tzedakah, as far as if you have to triage, because you have so many different tzedakah needs, which tzedakahs take priority over others. So Seder ha'adifus b'tzedakah hu kidal halon. Okay, pidyon shvuyim. The number one tzedakah priority is pidyon shvuyim. Now, what does pidyon shvuyim mean? We have to define that, right? But simply stated, it means redeeming captives, people who have been kidnapped, and the people who are holding them for ransom are demanding a certain amount of money to get them back. So that would be the highest priority for a community. Jews, yeah, to redeem Jews. You may sometimes find this statement of pidyon shvuyim being used more liberally than anyone who's thrown in prison and they need money for legal aid and to make bail. Some people consider that pidyon shvuyim as well, but that's not necessarily true. There is a principle, even in Judaism, if you do the crime, you got to do the time. And there's no mitzvah to try and get someone out of jail if they have been rightfully convicted of a crime. So there was a very high profile case of a man who was running a slaughterhouse, and there was a question of, was he was he being wrongfully prosecuted, right? And this was it seems that based on the facts that emerged from the case, that there was some kind of corruption going on to try and make an example out of this person. And they threw the book at him, when in reality he should have gotten a much lighter sentence for the crimes that he did commit. In other words, I don't think anyone is suggesting that he didn't commit crime at all. He did commit criminal offenses in the operation of his business, but should he have gotten let's say, the 25 years in prison that he got? And I think President Trump ended up pardoning him. And when he got out of prison, and that was where they used the term pidyon shvuyim. They use, it's a special mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim to help this guy to whatever extent you can. So whether or not there was a mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim is not clear to me. I'm not so clear that there was a mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim, but certainly in a situation where the person was doing more time than he should have done, it would seem that there is a mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim when he's being wrongfully imprisoned for an excessive sentence. That does seem to be correct, but it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you are successful in getting the guy out of prison, that you should make him into a national hero of the Jewish people. That seems to me somewhat, yeah.
When somebody is, for example, let's say the wife wants some of their husband, you call the police, they get taken in jail, he take it right away, and they'll come and get in jail.
Post bail. Yeah, look, there are situations of where you have overzealous systems. In Canada, yes, it's true. The example that Ron just gave is where, let's say, the husband and wife get into a fight, and the wife wrongfully accuses the husband of domestic abuse just so that she can get him into trouble because she sees the writing on the wall that they're headed for divorce, right? And then, that's actually quite a horrible thing. And it's horrible that we have a system that will believe a woman just by saying, oh, my husband hit me, without any evidence, will immediately arrest the husband, take him to prison. I think it's gotten a little better, but there are still some cases of that. I believe you. Yeah. So that would be an example of pidyon shvuyim, where a person is wrongfully imprisoned. But remember that pidyon shvuyim doesn't mean that just because a guy's in jail, there's a mitzvah to get him out. There are many gedolim who, when asked this shaila about pidyon shvuyim, said, let's look at the particular situation. If the guy deserves to be in jail, there's no mitzvah to pull him out. If he's committed white-collar crime, or if he's accused of pedophilia or something like that, there's no mitzvah to get him out of jail. Okay. This term of pidyon shvuyim in ancient and medieval times was in reference to people where they were kidnapped by people, like what goes on sometimes in Mexico and other third world countries, where a gang will kidnap someone knowing that the family has money, right? That's really the traditional term of pidyon shvuyim.
So, policy is not based on returning people. I guess the Israeli government is taking that position.
Yeah, well, that's even, nowadays, the tragedy is that they end up killing the people they kidnap. It's very rare for a person to be kept alive. I think Gilad Shalit was the last case of where someone was actually saved and kept alive. Next, tzedakah lekrovim, the next level after pidyon shvuyim, is charity for your relatives. They take the highest priority. Number 3 is hachzakas haTorah o cholim aniyim, supporting Torah study, or poor people who are sick and need support for curative causes. Number 4 is b'niyas beis hakneses kashein beis hakneses b'makom utzrachim hachrei chayim shel beis hakneses, supporting the synagogue. let's say, building a shul in a community where there is no shul, or providing the essential needs for your local synagogue. That's priority number 4. Priority number 5, Hachnasas Kala Yasoma, helping marry off an orphan girl who needs to get married. And number 6, Sha'ar Aniyim, the remaining poor people also, but that would be the lowest priority in this list of prioritizations. It's a little bit surprising that this is the order. Let me just take a quick look. It's in Shulchan Aruch Yoredei, Siman Reish Mem Tes Seif Tes Vav. Let's see what. Let's quickly take a look. Okay, where is this from? Shulchan Aruch Reish Mem Tes Seif Tes Vav. I just am going there and I don't see what he's talking about. Reish Mem Tes 249 Seif Tes Vav. Gabait Tzedakah sheyesh biyadam ma'os tzedakah yasiu bahem betulot aniyot shein tzedakah gedola mizu. The Gaboim may use charity funds in their possession as dowries for poor virgins, for there is no greater charity than this. I don't know why he put that so low on the list. Yesh mi sha'omer shemitzvah beis hakneses adifa mitzvah tzedakah, umitzvah tzedakah lina'arim lilmod Torah o lecholim aniyim adif mitzvah beis hakneses. He says there is an opinion that holds that the mitzvah of support of building or supporting a shul is greater than the mitzvah of tzedakah. That's where it comes from. Mitzvah tzedakah lina'arim lilmod Torah o lecholim aniyim, and the mitzvah of giving money to young men to be able to study Torah or to poor people who are sick is even bigger than the mitzvah of building a shul. That's where he gets it from. He's building that from this sieve. Okay, and what we need to do is really look in the Aruch HaShulchan and see if he agrees with this. I would want to see the Aruch HaShulchan, who was a community shul rav, to find out how he paskins as far as how you prioritize it, if this system is really the accepted system. So Mirza Hashem, maybe I'll pull something up from the Aruch HaShulchan for tomorrow, and we'll take a look at that. Okay, I think we'll hold it here for today, and we'll see. We'll Mirza Hashem be meeting tomorrow morning, Erev Shavuos, and that'll be our last shir for the week. All right, so have a great day, everybody.